Welcome to the Movement Podcast. This show is all about movement, giving you a better idea of how you can optimize the human body to be the best it can be.
Hi, thank you for joining the Movement Podcast today. And today's topic is going to go a little bit away from Gray, kind of how we normally look at things. And let's talk about predicting athlete performance and talent ranking. And the reason that goes against a lot of what we talk about, we don't really like predicting things. However, the time's coming, especially with AI, machine learning. You put in the data in and it's spitting out. I mean, things right now are changing so quick. You're going to be able to see that start happening more and more, being able to predict what are the characteristics for someone who's going to be at a higher level. I mean, everyone's trying to do that. Every parent that's got a kid playing, travel baseball is trying to figure that out so they can get that D1 scholarship.
Right.
So this idea has been around a long time, but I think, what is difficult, in my opinion, Gray, in order to be able to do that and have a conversation is you got to figure out, how are you measuring performance? If you're going to try to predict who's going to be the best or better at something, then you got to figure out, what is that something that you're measuring?
Well, they're hard measurements, like a 100-meter sprint has clocks and timers. Gymnastics has a bunch of judges. So there are different levels of subjectivity or objectivity. Golf has a pretty robust score. You can watch it happen. You can watch somebody mess up. So when you're looking at performance, number one, I think you got to look at an entire season or cycle, because that's really where you find talent. Because the grind of the NBA season or the PGA Tour or something like that, there's no off season now for a lot of sports. So you've got to basically not watch the data point as much as you watch the pattern. Bill Belichick said this: do you have a love for the game? Are you intelligent? Do you have a problem putting in the work? If I got those three things, we're going to do fine, right? We're going to hit your limit somewhere, and then we'll exploit the other thing. But I think what happens is, when we're trying to do talent ranking and prediction, the one thing we got to remember is this is a slice of time that says, if you don't change anything, this is what I think is going to happen.
That's the key component. I think that is what's so hard to measure, especially in, let's look at youth sports. You may be the best player on the field far and away at 13 years old. But what's going to happen when you're 17, 18, 19? That doesn't mean you're going to be the best player when you're 19, because, who knows what's going to happen.
Well, you have opinions. And that's why I so much love the book Moneyball, because we got all these scouts looking for the perfect specimen. Sometimes the late bloomer is the one, right? Sometimes the early one is the one. So there's a lot of ways to get to performance. But I ask myself this question, when I go sit in a deer stand and become a philosopher: what's a durable performer? Because nobody cares about durability, the ability to show up day after day and not get injured and do the work. If you don't perform, we don't care how durable you are, right? And if you perform well, but rarely ever show up, then we can't count on you. So it's the yin-yang symbol. These two things have to exist at a level of acceptability. You have to be durable enough to be present enough, right? And a coach can decide, how present do you need to be? Yeah, you can miss one game and 2 practices, it's over, right? That's just, okay, whatever the rule is. But the ability to be present. Now, I didn't say resist injury, but injuries are one of the reasons you're not there. A poor state of readiness is one of the reasons you're not there. But the ability to be present and the ability to contribute, right? So what is your position? Because a hockey goalie may not have to defend the goal the whole game. Just stand there because nobody gets down the ice. Doesn't matter. Did you contribute? So if you're present and when called upon you contribute, I'd call you a durable performer. So let me tell you how I use this. If we go into a team that's asking you and I to do sort of like an off-season analysis, I ask the coaches, how many guys here would you love just to clone? And they rarely say the franchise player, the best guy, the one everybody talks about on ESPN. Those 4 guys, They're always here. They always contribute. They're the backbone of the team. They hold the thing together. And then I ask the next question. Let's run them through a bunch of tests and see how many they don't fail. I didn't say, let's see how good these guys are at all these physical metrics. They don't fail their flexibility test. They don't fail their balance test. They don't fail their cardio test. They don't get injured a lot. They don't have a significant past medical history in the injuries they have had. They took the rehab serious and recovered nearly fully from it. So it's this, believe it or not, boring topic of non-failure. Don't fail your sleep. Don't fail your relationships. Don't fail your nutrition. Don't fail your breathing. Don't fail your flexibility. Don't fail your movement screen. Don't fail your power screen. I didn't say you got to be the best, because it's very hard to be. But look at the people who are contributing and always present, and find out all the things they don't do similarly.
Well, it's you may be bad in one thing, just don't be bad in a lot. Keep it above the threshold. But one thing that the reason we've got to this topic is because we had a research study come across my desk. What was the date? May. It was actually just published this May. And of course, the reason it comes to me, it has the FMS in it. And because we're talking about it, of course, it makes the FMS look good. However, like any research study, let me get it over to the real top researchers, not me, in our community.
The other kind of PhD.
Yeah, the other kind of PhD, to give us some feedback to say, is this something worth us actually looking at? Because let's be honest, a lot of times you can make research say pretty much what you want in many situations. I think there was some other research that was done, or maybe just data that was done. I think 90% of the research that is funded is positive towards whoever's funding it. So if you're funding the research, you're going to get what you want. That being said, so we got it through our filter of people who we trust that can tell us whether this research is good or bad. And they came back and said, yeah, it's a pretty good study. Pretty good. It's good enough for me to talk about. All right.
Okay, let's talk about it.
So the topic, and we'll have this in the show notes, so you guys can check it out. The topic of the title, Predictive Athlete Performance Modeling with Machine Learning and Biometric Data Integration. Fancy schmancy to say they put a lot of stuff in the mixer and then came out and said, what predicts performance? All right, let's take a quick break here to tell you about Symmio. Symmio is our holistic wellness platform designed to give you the tools and resources to assess, manage, and improve your clients' and patients' overall health and wellness. Go to Symmio.com to sign up for a free trial today. That's SYMMIO.com.
We got 2 new courses I think you'll like. One's a deep dive on mobility and one's a deep dive on stability. We really unpack that and show you how simple single corrective exercises aren't nearly as good as a meal of mobility assembled in a flow, in a set of stations. Do the same thing for stability. It's sort of a new way of looking at things, but it's that same old functional approach, just with nice packages that actually give you huge dividends.
My first question, like I asked you, Greg, okay, and I'm going to share with you, what is performance? So here's how they looked at performance. They took all these metrics and said, this is how we are defining, how we as in the researchers are defining performance. And I wouldn't necessarily disagree. It doesn't get into actual sport participation, but I think we all agree all these things matter. Physiological domains, heart rate, oxygen consumption, lactate threshold, recovery metrics. They measure those things. Biomechanical, movement efficiency, FMS, maybe use acceleration, power, agility, strength, flexibility. All the things I think all of us as professionals would say are important. Psychological factors, mental toughness, athlete engagement. That's an interesting one. Passion, which some of what you just mentioned a second ago. Group cohesion, resilience, right? That matters. Like if you're not tough, if you stub your toe and you're out, that goes back to you. You're not a durable performer. That's mental toughness, right? You got to have some mental toughness.
We've seen all the data on grit.
All the data on grit. So they're using these things. Contextual domain, competition level, team versus individual, training environment, seasonal phase. So they took all of these factors and said, which of these predict how well you're going to do in most of these, right?
And it was, so what we're saying is multi-sports.
Multi-sports, all of this, they threw in the mixer and said, all right, if these are this is how we're measuring, both through questionnaires, both through getting strength measured, all of these
high
factors.
correlations with success.
Yeah.
Not causes. We don't know if they're causing it or not, but they're high correlations with success.
Well, but the success, again, understanding that what I just mentioned is how they're measuring success. The more of these things that you're good at or score well in is how so whoever does well, let me make this clear. Whoever does well in all those things I just mentioned, they're going to say they're going to perform at a high level. That's their assumption. Again, they're not considering if you're a basketball player, you're a golfer. They're saying if you do well in all of these factors versus someone who does not do well in these factors, the person who do well in all these factors should be a better performer based off these quote unquote performance metrics.
Or at least have more athleticism, right? We don't know how they're going to perform, but
again, let's not get in the weeds on that.
Okay.
That's what they're doing. To make that clear, what predicted your ability or how well you did in all of those factors, believe it or not, was the FMS score. The FMS score was the single most important global feature of predicting those performance outcomes.
Wait a minute. We've been in this whole injury prevention silo forever, because every time we wind up talking about the FMS, everybody else says, oh yeah, we use the FMS, see who's going to get injured, see if anybody's got pain, but we have a whole battery of performance tests. Well, I think you can save that battery of tests. If you can't pass the movement screen, then really what you're going to capture in your performance test is the inefficiency of their movement.
Right.
At power, at speed, at scale, at force.
So further, so that physiological domain, which include the FMS was the single most. Movement efficiency, power, strength, those were. The second one was psychological factors. Now, what's interesting there, and Gray, if we go back and look at one of the first research studies that was done in the military, it was done in Marine officer candidates.
Yep.
So we went in and we screened, and I was involved with the screening. There's over 900, at the time, I think 900 Marines going in through this officer candidate school. And if you scored low on the FMS, you were one of the takeaways, 2 times more likely to get injured during that time. Now, there's some issues with the research, so I'll make that statement, put that little asterisk by there. Not too much, it still said that, but you get into the weeds a little bit, researchers can pick it apart, fine. The other factor that was not picked apart that much was that you were twice as likely to drop out of officer candidate school.
Even if not injured.
Even if not, irregardless of injury, you were twice as likely to drop out. That, to me, goes back to that psychological factor.
I think that's a good identification, because one of the things that you and I have learned to harp on, whether we're talking about wellness or performance or somebody's potential to rehab, is this mind-body connection, okay? And I'm not talking about the mind-body connection that you get if you go on an ayahuasca journey or go to yoga camp. I'm basically saying, are you self-aware? Because most self-aware people can look at a movement screen or a physical task or even an obstacle course and tell you about how they're going to do. And then you got people who like, oh yeah, I'm going to kill that thing. And they turn an ankle 2 steps in to the mud hole, or I can't do that at all. And I actually do pretty good. So we have these people whose ability to predict or see this physical task in their mind's eye, their mind is very connected with their body and vice versa. And then you have the people that are overconfident, okay, who are probably going to put themselves at risk. And then you have the people who are underconfident that are probably going to never challenge themselves enough to be different. So that, to me, number one, I'm glad research lined up with that. And I definitely think that if you're in Marine Officer Candidate School with a poor movement screen, and let's be honest, a movement screen is not that hard. Do you have balance? Can you do a difficult push-up, right? If you go to Marine Officer Candidate School and have this kind of physical baggage, I think your mind just wrote a check your body can't cash. And if it takes you 3 weeks of this to find that out, I guess it does, and I guess that's why you drop. I don't know. But this level of self-awareness is where you and I have really focused a lot of our movement corrective strategies. It's getting somebody to friction that balance problem, that flexibility problem. And we go to repetition and breath and changing your posture a little bit just to get you over that obstacle, because it is your innate biological drive to compensate, right? Limping or not, I got to get away from this pit bull, right? My wrist hurts or not, I'm going to be in a fight. So we will easily override these signals. But when we're not in harm's way or not in heavy competition or not in a life-threatening situation, you should polish this stuff. It means something.
So two other takeaways from this study was, if you score high, other things we found, it doesn't matter that much. Meaning, if you're above 18 on the FMS, it doesn't mean you're going to do better at any one of these factors.
Okay, that makes sense.
However, you score low, it means you're not going to do well in these other factors.
Right.
And one more thing to kind of let you chew on. The other piece here is the significant interaction effect between FMS score and athlete engagement. It goes back to what you were just kind of speaking on. Better your score, you're going to be engaged more.
Yeah, and once again, Bill Belichick summed it up. Do you love it? Are you intelligent? Do you want to work? And believe me, my criteria for intelligence is communication and accountability. I don't care how many textbook definitions you've memorized. Can you intelligently see that there's something you need to work on, and are you willing, to work on it? The funny thing that you brought that up, because in our travels, getting to experience some of the stuff we do to Navy SEALs at BUD/S and talking to some of these guys who are the drill instructors, they made a unbelievably wise statement one time to me. They said, we already know who's going to flunk out the very first day. We can smell it on them. We see them standing there. They think they're going to do fine. They hope they're going to do fine, but we already know who's going to fail. But we don't know who's going to pass, and that's why we do this. Because the process that they beat on these guys at basic underwater demolition BUD/S is part selection and part development. They are training you the whole time because you're running a little further, you're lifting a little more. The tasks are getting incrementally harder, right? So you're getting a training effect. But it's also a grind, right? I'm sure you're rushed through your meals and don't get full and adequate sleep. And one of the things that the guys who actually pass BUD/S will tell you is, don't be first, don't be last, because now you're going to stand out and they're going to call you out. But just get it done, get it done, get it done. But it's so amazing to me that the people who've experienced this grind, the drill instructors that do it to them, already recognize who's going to fail. But we don't know who's going to pass because we don't know who's got the medal tomorrow, because we ain't got to tomorrow yet. And so I honestly think that that's where the movement screen has only been viewed as a injury intervention tool and not a talent identification tool. Because let me tell you something. In this age, with all of the unnecessary injuries and training tangents that people get on, when somebody shows up and they're an 18 on the movement screen, I'm like, good God. Well, what have you been doing? Because whatever it is, keep doing it.
Well, I think what we've learned, though, over the years, what the research has told us, because, early on, we've always said that the FMS should be part of your injury risk, your injury prediction methodology. And what we had always said is it should be part of that during your training. Like, why in the world, and again, it's almost common sense to me just because I've been in it for so long, but if it hurts when you squat, why do you want to go in the weight room and throw a bunch of weight on your back? Or if you can't do that, knowing that's where our message was always, hey, you want to reduce your injury risk, do an FMS so that you're training more appropriately. And I think that's the message that got lost when all the research started coming out in the 2010 to 2015, 2017. A lot of the research was coming out saying, well, FMS is not predicting injury. Two factors that I saw occur. One, they were looking at the total score, which you and I both know that's not what you need to be looking at. Even though some of this research looks at that, total score doesn't matter. Lower scores matter. Total scores don't matter that much. But I think that got lost. But I think what got lost is that it's one factor for movement, but there's other things you got to consider if you want to make a robust injury prediction, injury risk model. You have to look at other things. And even in this study saying it predicts, It just means FMS was the top one. If I want to know, great, just because you mentioned, just because you score low or high on an FMS doesn't mean you're going to be a great athlete.
But
my point is, if I take the FMS plus what this is saying, strength, power, do a psychological profile, I can zero that in more and more and more and more.
Right.
And that's the message, I think. And I don't want somebody to take away, you and I are sitting here talking about, hey, do the FMS. If you score high, you're going to be a better athlete. That's not the takeaway.
No, and I just think that a lot of people probably score differently. Some people were more mentally tough. Some people had more power. But the one consistent thing is it's hard to be in that top group and have a bad movement screen.
That's the point.
Yes.
Like if we're going to create this model, which is what this research is trying to do, create this performance model, FMS needs to be part of that.
And I want to make two statements. When people do movement screens and a movement pattern has pain, because most of us have an exercise science degree at the basis of athletic training, physical therapy, chiropractic, whatever, a lot of people who cut their teeth in exercise science, including myself, think pain is an aggregate of being too tight or too weak. So we simply come at you with stretching exercises or strengthening exercises, not understanding the mechanisms that cause pain. So to me, when you have pain in a movement pattern, you go in a completely different bucket than if you have a bad movement pattern.
Which is why looking at the total score is really not the right thing to do.
Exactly. We didn't design it that way, but we can all get lazy and say, yeah, I mean, if your total score is 11, you got big problems. But if your total score is an 18, you can get there a lot of different ways.
Well, and I think because there was a handful of research studies that were done, and again, you can argue with research, and that's the point, is research studies done to basically eliminate one question, but basically get you to another question.
Right.
Because when you get to a conclusion, based off of this research, we think that the next question that should be asked or answered is this. And I mean, right now, Gray, there's probably 300 articles on the FMS, and a lot of the ones on research are predominantly saying that there is a relationship between injury risk and low FMS scores. And even some of the more recent research, the one right here, this one just came across my desk, and I'll go ahead and figure out. Let me see when this one was done. This was done here in the last 2023, so pretty recent. The title is Prediction and Injury Risk Based on Movement Patterns and Flexibility in a 6-month prospective study among physically active adults. And what it found was there was a 7-fold higher risk of injury when FMS scores were less than 14. Now, the reason I want to bring that up, again, we just talking about the total score not mattering. It matters if it's below 14.
Right.
And that's why that 14 number continues to be, in a lot of the research, the cutoff point. Because if you're below 14, what do you have to have? You got to have a 1 or a 0. And if you don't know about the FMS, 0 means it hurts, a 1 means you're pretty screwed up.
Right. Right.
Now, the other part of that is that when you talk about injury, though, and I know we're shifting away this is part of performance. And that's what some of that, one of the performance metrics, when we talk about that predicting performance, and you brought it up, durability is injury. Well, when I read a research article that talks about injury prediction or injury risk, the first question that, if you're reading this, that you should ask is, how did they measure injury?
Yes.
What is injury? So this is how they measure injury in this study. Complaint resulting in pain, discomfort, causing temporary or complete inability to continue your physical activity.
Gotcha.
So if you had to stop,
right,
because just because you got pain doesn't mean, how many runners are running their 5K or marathon with pain?
There's a lot of gold medals won with a little bit of pain on
right.
board.
So that's important concept to remember. But this looked at a lot of different factors, like all studies should. FMS, all right, 73 prediction to accuracy when researchers used FMS cut points to anticipate who get hurt. Flexibility was 41%. That was the second one. That's one of the more interesting factors I found coming out of the study, is that movement and poor movement was a better predictor than flexibility.
Well, to me, when we talk about movement and movement patterns, flexibility, mobility, pliability, whatever you want to call it, I think a good overarching term for that is freedom. right? Unrestricted movement. So your shoulders aren't restricted, okay? But when we start talking about stability, coordination, motor control, and agility, okay? So number one criteria, you do need the freedom to move. But if you have the freedom to move and don't have the control to move within a safe slot, then flexibility by itself could be an asset or a liability. Now, if you're unbelievably stiff, then a lot of your control is happening because of your stiffness, not because of your coordination, your timing, your proprioception, your awareness. So you can stiff your way through something looking stable, and you can wobble your way through something looking mobile. But the way we created the original movement screen was going to the developmental patterns that actually help your brain and body form gait. And gait don't start with stepping. It starts with rolling. It starts with crawling. It starts with kneeling, lunging, squatting. Okay? So when we impose the same knee flexion on a lunge pattern as we do a squat pattern, you have a chance to sort of have a wobble factor because we can't see a left-right difference in your squat very well, but I can see you can lunge way better on your left and right side. What I'm saying is there's enough flexibility and motor control built into the movement screen to see serious flexibility problems and serious balance problems. And everything else is not, I think, predictable because now it's a nuanced thing. Well, you can't do this yoga move, so you're not flexible, or you can't bench press this weight, so you're not strong. See, we're relating every physical task back to an exercise, not movement. And that's why I wish some of the degrees we got weren't called exercise science, they were called movement science, because exercise is a hell of an asset. But if all I'm doing is looking at every person trying to figure out what exercises they could do, I'm serving the God of exercise, not the God of movement. And if exercise ain't changing movement, please convince me why I'm supposed to do it. So.
Yeah, I mean, again, not to say that even based off this research that the FMS is the only thing you need to do to predict or see who's at risk for injury. It's a piece of the puzzle. And I think based off this research and the research that's coming out, movement screening based off this, they're using the FMS, should be part of whether you're trying to create a talent or performance predictive model, or whether you're trying to create an injury or, in your words, a durable performer model. Looking at fundamental movement using the FMS should be part of both of those if you really want to identify either one of those factors.
The other thing is, I don't want the listener to be overwhelmed. When we do movement screens, you and I, probably even tighter than most of the people we teach, I don't focus on all the problems. I focus on the driver. And so when the movement screen was created, we built a hierarchy. If you get a poor movement pattern in the push-up and in the leg raise, we literally say, hey, let's fix your leg raise. Your push-up may get better because your hips are more mobile, or we got something else to do when we fix your leg raise. But we created a hierarchy because a baby's got to roll before they crawl, and they got to crawl before they walk. So there's a hierarchy. Believe it or not, moving your body through space with mobility and stability has a hierarchy. And if you can't fix the leg raise problem, the push-up is going to have a virus on board. You can get somebody's push-up better without fixing their hips, but you're actually forcing compensation all the way up through. So even though we do a full movement screen, as soon as we find that weakest link, I judge your rate of progress on how quick that changes. And I'm not worried about the total score. Well, I can do that at any time.
And that goes back to somewhat some other research has said is like the overhead squat. The overhead squat is a poor overhead squat can be a risk factor, and it can be, but it doesn't tell you what to do. So if someone has a poor overhead squat, the only thing I can tell you is that person should not be squatting. That's it. I don't know why they can't squat.
Don't load this.
Don't load it. They just shouldn't be loaded to squat in the weight room. But I can't make any other recommendation on how to improve that squat without a more robust movement screen. Just like right now, Gray, we would both say, if I were to figure out who's at the highest injury risk, I'm going to do the FMS. Plus, I'm going to find out about their behavioral health, their sleep, their injury history, all the other factors that we need to be looking at to create that more robust lifestyle or holistic component that I need to do in order to not just figure out if they're high risk, but to figure out what I need to target to get them out of the high risk category.
You made a good point, and I'm working with a university right now that I know all these athletes are coming in preseason. They're going to go through a movement screen and probably a balance test and some other physical metrics, performance tests based on their sport. We're now putting the wellness app in front of that. We're challenging each of these athletes and getting the coach behind us to get them to do this wellness app, because a movement screen obviously is a precision tool to look at movement patterns. But we've proven that a self-movement screen almost puts you in the exact same place, but it gives us a chance to ask a few other questions. And those few other questions really help the college athlete understand the 360 degrees of showing up low risk and ready to go. And so these talks are funny because we can send this app out to the athletes 2 weeks before they show. They're going to get screened, they're going to get physicals, but we already know who to key on, because if I've got somebody who plans on playing a full competitive season and their wellness scores are worse than their parents, it's not going to be good. They're going to be chasing the whole time. They're not going to enjoy practice. They're not going to sleep well. They're not going to feel high energy, and they're not going to make the performance gains or skill gains like they're supposed to. Why? Because they got a movement learning disability. They're not rested, they're not recovered, and they're not stressed in the way they need.
So, I mean, I think that the key takeaway from this conversation, we started talking about performance. We kind of got into the durable performer, which means we get into the injury risk things. It has to be a multifactorial or a lot of different factors that we consider if we want to try to identify who's going to be maybe the best performer or who's going to be the most durable performer. And we could argue which one of those you want. I mean, I think you kind of need a combination of both. But one thing the research is telling us now that we've got this ability to throw all this stuff into an AI model, you've got to look at movement, fundamentals of movement. And most people, when they got to look at, let's be honest, they got to look at something like the FMS. Being able to look at a variety of fundamental movement patterns, squatting, balancing, lunging, those types of things has to be part of either one of those models.
There are more wellness appraisals in the world right now that simply look at step count or self-reported activity level without checking balance. And I tell you what, balance has a lot more to do with fall risk than step count does. So my point is, why is it so important not just to manage the quantity of your food, but the quality of your food? It's also important to manage the quantity of your movement and exercise. But if you don't have time to measure the quality, I think you're going to always end up lost in the next thing that you do. And so that's what we literally have tried to add. We need a quantity and quality appraisal of the calories you take in. They can't be empty calories. They do need to be nutrient dense. And they don't need to be too much, and they don't need to be too little. Movement has a quality factor, and we've got a lot more ways to check movement quantity with wearables and metrics than we do quality. So I think the reason we're still here is we've got this little qualitative model, and sometimes it means more than the quantities you're willing to post. And that's why we say well before often, because often reinforces well when you start with well, and often removes well from the equation when you just go pound the pavement.
And you mentioned the self-movement screen that we have. I'll go ahead and kind of sign off with this thing is go ahead and check it out for yourself. Get your own movement appraisal as well as your wellness appraisal. You can go to our website. You can check the show notes. Go through our self-movement screen and kind of see where you are.
I didn't do great the first time, but I'm doing better now because, once again, awareness.
Yeah.
So,
if you want to learn more about today's podcast or dive deeper into functional movement systems information, check out some of the resources and offers we're providing in the description. That will do it for this episode of the Movement Podcast.
Thanks for listening. And if you liked what you heard, please take a minute and subscribe and review.
If you want to learn more about our system and take the next step in your own movement journey,
visit us at movementpod.com.
Until next time, be sure to first move well
then move off.